So let me actually pass you the first question to chat, if I can, to the Zoom chat. Let's start lightly. The first question would be, hello, I see you have a lot of books behind you. Do you have a favorite genre of fiction or any specific book recommendations?
Oh, sure. So let's see. Right now, you know what I'm doing? Right now, I'm reading a history called Montaigu, and it is an annales school of history, very, very detailed French style of history. And it is about a village in Provence, right? And it's about the Cathars, right? These sort of Gnostic Christians, and this guy from the Inquisition went to, interrogate them, but in so doing, like a lot of oppressive people, he found all these details, right? So it's incredible to read all these incredible details about life in a medieval village in this book. And so I've taken to thinking and reading a bit more about history recently, because it seems to me that history is precisely this kind of top level or bottom level of the world where things are just happening fundamentally without an idea, without a reason. They are just they have the opaque silence to them. And so suddenly history strikes me as a very profound, I'm part of this is also I got onto the National Book Award committee for nonfiction with a lot of awesome people, and we've been meeting all year, and the ceremony is in November. And so I've been thinking a lot about the thing called nonfiction, which in a way is also history, right? It's just history of the present moment in a certain way. So I'm really intrigued by that right now. Let's see. In your lecture, you mentioned the scapegoat mechanism and mimetism. It might be an annoying question, but do you relate to René Girard's views of religion? Is religion free of the master versus slave issue? Can it be pure? Is being religious necessary to understand philosophy of ecology? To me, religion is inescapable. I think that's the fundamental thing to learn from René Girard, is that the thing called religion can't be ejected because it is default to whatever its names, whatever it is thought to name, it is default to being sentient, right? So radical atheism, I've always been a little suspicious of any atheism in a way. One of the fun things about Buddhism, I practiced Buddhism for many decades, and Buddhism describes itself as a non-theism. In other words, it doesn't matter if there is a God, if there isn't a God. It's how you are thinking or refusing to think this God is the issue. That's the only thing to worry about. That's what can start World War III, is how you think. It's not what you're thinking, it's how you're thinking. You can be thinking in the key of radical atheism, but the way you're doing it is actually theistic, right? I don't think this issue can be so easily transcended. I don't think it's possible. And so I think instead one needs just to be sort of honest about it. And yeah, I know a lot about how primordial it is from the point of view of the history experience of the scapegoat that I've had. That once you become the scapegoat, it's a very potent thing for a group to do, and the group will do everything to eject you from the group. And it's a difficult situation. It's what you really want to avoid it as a teacher. You also want to avoid it as a group leader. And if anything, politics is about groups, right? And the trouble with groups is that by default, I agree with Freud here. Groups are narcissistic. Groups are about inclusion versus exclusion. Unless you work on the group really hard, they're always going to be about excluding somebody or something, right? And not doing that requires a lot of work. You got to do a lot of work. But the interesting thing is it is possible. It's possible to create groups that are not based on scapegoat energy, but you really have to know what you're doing. You really have to know how to deal with it. The trouble with fascism is it's incredibly attractive to this very basic default part of oneself that has to do with sadistically excluding the evil.
Thank you very much. There comes the third one, actually, which is how do we deal with guilt when there is no one to go to for forgiveness related to climate guilt?
Yeah. How to deal with guilt? I'm a big fan of feeling guilty, but if in a bad way. I love to feel, but I think I'm a bad person. I'm an abuse survivor. I have the thing called complex PTSD. And people like me think we did everything bad, that we actually are bad, because we got messed up when we were kids, and later on in life. And so I understand the issue from a very personal point of view, which is this sense that you can't be good, but think about it another way. The fascist is someone who is certain that they are the goodie. They're the good guy, right? The people who invaded the Capitol building in Washington, D.C., and killed the police officers and so on, they thought they were the good guy, right? Nancy Pelosi is the evil. They're trying to get rid of the evil, right? Genuinely good guy means you think you probably might be an evil guy. That's what good guy feels like, right? Genuinely good teacher, please say yes, that is like you think you might be a bad teacher, is part of feeling that knowing is part of being a good teacher, being a good parent. You feel like you're rubbish parent. You feel like you're getting it wrong, Being a truly great country, like Make America Great Again, you think you might be actually a bit of a rubbish country. That's a precondition, right? So fundamentally, whether or not you're guilty for something that you did, say you think you destroyed the earth, right? You are also guilty in a more fundamental way, in a kind of just by existing way, just by being sentient way. And in a funny way, this lets you off the hook for all the stuff you did. The other thing about it is, and there's only one kind of person who really doesn't have any guilt, and that's called a psychopath, right? Psychopaths don't have any guilt. Psychopaths don't have any shame. They don't have any anxiety. They're very calm. They're mass murderer, very calm people. Anxiety is good, right? Doesn't feel good though. Yeah. So I'm it's like how to feel guilty, how to have that feeling, and how to make sure that's a gentle. You're being gentle to yourself, because you hear the loud voices of the parents yelling at you, and you hear the loud noises that the oppressive people are making to you, and you associate this with this feeling, right? But this feeling is actually a very gentle feeling of, wait a minute, did I leave the gas on? It's a very gentle, inconsequential, almost flicker of sentience, right? There's something wrong? Something's wrong. Something's wrong. Something's out of place. It's a very subtle, small, the loud, heavy pounding one, a lot of it is, you associated it with the loud voices of the parents, and you couldn't make this distinction between yourself and the other. And so this is the superego. But really, this voice of judgment is just nothing. It's coming from coming from nowhere. Blake calls it Nobo Daddy, right? Is it nobody and daddy kind of stuck together, you know? This is the oppression in our world is like Nobo Daddy is shouting at you. You know, a lot of religion is this invisible guy who's usually a white guy with a beard, but he's invisible and he wants to hurt you most of the time, you know. But then there's the other aspect of religion, which is the esoteric one, where it's like the VIP lounge. You know, when you've done enough good behavior, they let you in the VIP lounge and they're like, you know, this mean guy who wants to hurt you, that's not real. And what's really true is that you're connected to this divine energy, or you're part of it, or you are it, right? And your job is now you just have to notice. And they give you an instruction to do it with, right? They give you a meditation instruction, or they give you a meditation manual, you know, like the Christian one in the Middle Ages is called The Cloud of Unknowing, the English one. Beautiful. The title is the instruction, right? Just be a cloud of unknowing. Oh, you know, and you do this for a while and you come to your teacher and you're like, you know, I can't find it. However much I try to see the Buddha nature, I can't find it anywhere. And the teacher goes, that's it. That funny feeling that you can't quite touch it, tantalizing feeling, that's it. It has to be it because it's made out of time. You can never hold on to it, right? You can let it happen, you know, and I think, you know, then you learn to hit yourself less and hit the other less, right? But that doesn't get rid of the anxiety. It doesn't get rid of the guilt. It shouldn't. You know, it shouldn't. You should feel it's a funny thing, but maybe just a little tiny bit evil. But just a tiny little bit evil is very tasty. You know, like a little toast, you know, when you burn the toast, just a tiny bit, it's quite tasty. You know, the rice pudding, you know, it has this little skin on top of it. It's more delicious, you know, just a little tiny bit, slightly with a smile, you know, just a little flavor, perfume of slightly evil, you know, is you know, like how delicious perfume is made out of really nasty stuff, but it's really diluted, you know, very gentle, you know. It's kind of that, and it really is that, right? It's like religion is made out of the poison, you know, the feeling of being poisoned when you want to get rid of the poison, but you can't completely. You know, you end up dead if you try to get rid of all the nasty sensations. You end up eating McDonald's, then you die of a heart attack, right? So you can't. So you have to have a little tiny bit of nasty broccoli, bleh, you know, vitamins, you know, art, right? Like art could kill you. If it was turned up to 11, the art could really hurt you. The music could blow your ears out, right? But you just have like a low dose of evil, you know. It's like a nice homeopathic level inoculation vaccine level of evil, you know, is good for you.
Thanks. Here comes another question. Your new book begins with a very personal introduction, probably the most personal I have read from you. I wonder to what extent this is just a personal introduction, or a type of method. Opening oneself up at the same time implies a participatory reading so that the reader can't remain distant, including the topics the book poses.
Well, of course it is a method in the sense that I'm trying to persuade the reader. I'm also trying to persuade myself because I'm the reader as well, right? But that doesn't mean it's a ruse, you know. Hyperobjects, there was a lot of personal stuff in hyperobjects, but it was much lower stakes personal and sometimes fictional, right? Just using the first person as a device. This book, I'm more using the first person actually to point to myself all the time. And one reason why is it's the opposite of what's being asked in a way. it's taking responsibility for the bad stuff, right? If I say you and I point at you, then that's very provocative, right? And if I say we, then who is this we and who am I excluding, right? And if I say one, like, yeah, en French, en, it's too generalizing, right? I have to own the problem. If I'm going to talk to this religion thing, I have to say I, formally speaking, and then it's important to be honest about what really happened. Otherwise, it's just also fiction. So there is a kind of inviting people to participate, but also the I kind of excludes in a good way, right? I want it to be a protection, because I went through the bad stuff, so you don't have to, right? I can understand it, so you don't have to go through it, rather than I'm trying to make you go through, and so I hope it worked. But yeah, it became very deliberate after a while, even more deliberate, because I realized, first of all, I have to take responsibility for these heavy ideas. So I wrote this preface. Often you write that thing at the end, which is what I wrote it at the end. The book is this big, then I wrote this huge, big introduction to it, right? But it's like this roller coaster. You go up, 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 and zooms quite quickly down. Once you get to the top, it's fast, right? Because I set all the stuff up, right? And then I changed all the pronouns in the book to I, or most of them. Some of them, there's one we maybe, and there's a couple of one on, but all of the rest of it is I, because I just couldn't not own everything that I'm saying and take responsibility for it. And that's another answer to the question that was asked by Lukasz, right? Like there comes a point when you need to be talking out of more nasty stuff inside of you to explore true things.
Thank you. And here comes a series of questions I kind of put together because they seem to actually follow one another, which is, how should human society change if we accept the idea that there's no fixed boundary between nature and humanity? Is it possible to truly exist in ecological harmony, or is the dark side of ecology inevitable? And what about the selfish gene that leads people to compete and fight? How can there be peace?
Yeah, I could superficially say, oh, the genes aren't really selfish, right? They can't be. Exhibit A, sexual display, right? It's very expensive to make a flower. It's very expensive to have, peacock's tails. If genes are selfish, they're trying to minimize energy output, right? It's extremely inefficient. We live in an extremely inefficient world. These things here, these ears, right? If Steve Jobs had designed these ears, they would just be little pinprick because it's more efficient, right? This stuff is just crap, So we don't really live in a selfish gene world. However, that's not really the question. The question is, what about aggression and competition, right? Like if you didn't have aggression, you couldn't eat. Right, you have to have narcissism because otherwise you're dead. Right, you have to be able to take the banana and you peel it open and you eat the banana. Right, that's how to live. So that's the whole thing. Religion is a conversation with competition, aggression, jealousy, anger. All these things are very part of your world. That they're sort of default to being alive. Right, but where do you put them? What do you do with them? How do you think about them? In Buddhism, they talk about all these different negative emotions are actually aspects of Buddha nature, but they've become too mechanical, right? So anger, you want to attack the world, is when anger starts to meditate, it becomes mirror-like wisdom, Vajra mind, right? You can see everything really clearly. So angry person can see a problem and gets really angry with it, wants to get rid of the problem, right? Mirror-like wisdom sees the problem, doesn't want to get rid of the problem. That it is the problem. It's okay with the flaw, right? But they're actually polar. They're related. They're not different. The Buddha mind and Confucian mind are the same. Otherwise, you couldn't become a Buddha, right? They're different, but they are different aspects of the same thing. It's very, very hard to think about this, right? Yeah, like knowing that you're evil is what being good feels like. Yeah, it's a paradox, Christianity paradox. Yeah, also in Islam, also in Judaism. You know, knowing that you're the goodie is the phenomenology of evil, right? So human society is changing already now that more modern humans know what indigenous humans already know, right? Which is that there isn't a fixed boundary between the human world and the non-human world, and in particular, this boundary between people and not people is very suspicious, you know. And maybe people is much easier to get to than we like to think, and maybe people is cheaper than we like to think. So maybe ducks can be people, or maybe even, you know, bottles of water can be people, right? And maybe one of the problems with white European, Western American Christianity is this war against the spirit, right? This idea of animism, right? That's evil, right? That's pagan, heathen people believe that pencils are alive and ducks are people, so we should hurt them. But in a way, this is just a war against this Holy Spirit, in a way. That it's actually where the spirit is the so-called animism. You know, it's much more like it. You know, so I think, you know, treating more and more and more things like people starts to become a syndrome, and also person becomes much easier. It's much less of a big deal. You know, it's not so heavy, and also it becomes more uncanny. You know, person versus machine stops to mean something very strong, and what that means is that this funny feeling that I'm an android doesn't go away. It kind of gets worse, right? This funny feeling that actually I'm a puppet, the Descartes paranoia, you know, that I'm an artifact of some software that is making this thing feel like it's a person, doesn't go away. It gets worse. This funny Cartesian paranoia, you know, the Gnostic paranoia, like I'm a puppet, right? The Gnostic solution, which is that I'm created by an evil God, I'm trapped inside a good God's universe. That's the trapped inside an evil God's universe is a solution. The feeling is great, which is I'm a replicant, I'm an android, you know, I'm a character in a story. But the solution is very violent. You know, I think the Christianity, actual Orthodox version, not Greek Orthodox, but just the straightforward, has a lot in it. You know, but there's a kind of Gnosticism inside of a lot of Christianity, like Catholicism. The body is evil, the spirit is good, right? It's almost the other way around. That this is the good thing, and the idea about it, the spirit is the bad, is the evil. You know, the distant thing in our world is not the spiritual world; it's the physical world. Is literally is in the future. Yeah, that's further away than the furthest away black hole in the middle of the Milky Way galaxy is this huge black hole. You can think about it much easier than you can be this. This is very, very, very far away in another way. Tape measure, it's very close, but it's very far away in another sense. But it's totally available, but you can't access it. Yeah. You can only glimpse it when uncanny things happen. And so this funny, uncanny feeling that, you know, I'm a bit evil, or that I'm a puppet, or that all these things will increase as ecological awareness and politics becomes more powerful. We won't get rid of the problem. We won't get rid of the problem will get worse, right? But we'll smile about it more is the thing. We'll have more of a sense of irony. Irony is the feeling of a contradiction, right? Like my feeling that I transcend the world is how I know that I'm in the world. Will be much more, we'll be able to smile about it. You know, my funny feeling of dislocation is how I know I'm located. will get worse, is the thing. Thinking that ecology means we can get rid of the dualism and feel like we're part of everything, that's just a fascist. That's not ecology, that's fascism. It's very popular, that's the problem. You know, real ecological awareness is feeling a bit dislocated. You know, the whole idea of the neighbor is that this other being who's like, they're you, but they're not, but they're sort of dislocated from you, but they're the same, but they're not. Right? It's a disturbing, uncanny idea, right? As opposed to the other, who I know who the other is, I can kill them, I can, right? So I think this notion of neighbor starts to apply to fish and, you know, bacteria, and you know, it just becomes more of a problem that is talked about in Islam and Christianity and Judaism.
Now, you have another question which goes, do you agree that many US evangelicals, but I guess that the question can be generalized to a general public, view climate change as the biblical apocalypse and welcome it? If so, why do you think this is?
It's incredibly unfortunate. It's incredibly unfortunate that this is the case. One reason why actually is a misunderstanding about the notion of evangelism. You know, evangelical, you know, the idea is that people must be persuaded of the truth, otherwise they will go to hell. That's the evangelical idea, right? The other idea is that you are an authentic Christian. Other people are more fake. You know, you're the real one, you know, because you're more intense. Both these ideas are very toxic, right? And they're not true. If you look at the word evangelize, the Greek word, you know, I studied Greek as a kid, and I know this. It's a middle voice. You know, in Greek, there's active and passive and middle, and middle does not have a subject or an object, right? The verb to become in Greek, giniesthai, is a middle voice verb. It does not have an object or a subject. It is not part of this duality of master versus slave, actually. And euangelis desthai, which is the Greek verb, does not have an object. You can't evangelize people. You can't do it. What you can do is more like the black evangelicalism, Pentecostalism, black Pentecostalism. It's like Tourette's, right? Tourette's syndrome of religion. You just blah, you know. That's evangelism. You can't help it. That speaking in tongues, you're just following the truth process, no matter where it leads you. You know, it's actually like you're willing to submit to a thought process that is very uncanny and takes you to a different place. You know, that's evangelism. And in a funny way, therefore, the evangelical is convinced of almost the exact opposite, as this is quite common, that the original word means something almost opposite to the way it's often used in very common speech, right? And yeah, the end of the world is a good idea, because then we'll find out who the goody is, and the goody has got to be us, because we want to be in charge of everything, right? And we'll get to see, you know, the sheep from the goats, and we know we're the goody, but this is just fascism. You know, that America is prone to it. You know, America created the KKK as a response to the Civil War. Hitler learned everything from the KKK. In fact, Hitler thought that the American Constitution was too fascist, right? The one-drop theory of race, which is that if you have, going back 10 generations, a black ancestor, then you're black, that was too much for Hitler. He only went back to the grandparents, or the great-grandparents for the Jewishness. America's more fascist, potentially, right? Which is, and America was going to be fascist. It was very, very, very dicey in the 1930s. This is why this is happening. And furthermore, tyranny is the default group politics, based on what I was just saying. It's not the exception, it's the default. And democracy means you have to fighting against it all the time, trying to make sure it doesn't keep popping up like cockroaches coming out of your wall, you know. And so the idea that we're going to find out who the good guys are, and that's going to be us, you know. There's a strong case to be made that this form of Christianity is actually a kind of Satanism. There's an essay by Thomas Merton called The Moral Theology of the Devil, where he basically argues that in this version of Christianity, good versus evil is very, very unambiguous. And quite often the devil is more powerful than God themselves. And quite often the devil is the ruler of the world. So in effect, the devil is God. You know, this form of, it's the white one. You know, the Christianity is very segregated in America. Martin Luther King said the most segregated hour in the USA is 11 a.m. on a Sunday, because you get the black church and the white church, right? African-American Christianity, the way enslaved people absorbed the Christianity and redid it, it's much more Christianity to me than this other one. This other one, I'm almost ready to say is a fake, you know. But the trouble is, like, how do you say it? You know, I don't want to say it like it's heresy, like it's an evil heresy thing, but there's a lot of aggression and confusion in there.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid we have to wrap it up also, but maybe we have time just for one last short question. No, you don't?
No, like actually, no, we have to end this.
Okay, I'm sorry. So the last question was, where do you get so much hope? But I understand that would be.
There's a good answer to that. I have no idea.
Oh.
It just really, I mean that very seriously. When I look at the world, I'm a depression guy. I can turn everything into despair, horror, right? So how come I don't? That's really cool. If you think about it, it comes out of nothing. It comes from nowhere. Yeah, which is not the same thing as saying it isn't real. It's just, it pops up, even though I'm a very, I can turn anything into something terrible. I'm a very intellectual depression guy.
That was a good ending. No, Timothy, seriously, thank you very, very much for your time and for your ideas and for yourself, actually. So
thank you so much, Andre.
So thanks again.
You too. Yeah. Thank you, guys. What a lovely time. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.